Jackie, I tried to set it where they could bypass the lobby and it will not allow me to. So hopefully we'll be able to get everyone admitted in the next few minutes. Welcome everyone who's just joining here in the last couple of minutes. We appreciate you joining us for this session for the TRAM conference series. We will get started momentarily. We're just trying to get everyone admitted from the lobby so that we won't have that ding, 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 ding as Jess begins to present. So if you'll just please be patient with us, we appreciate that as we work to get everyone admitted who had registered, and then we will get started with the session. Attendees will remain in listen-only mode for the duration of the session. We do encourage that you use the chat and/or Q&A for comments and questions regarding the presentation. Just a few more moments. We still have people trying to arrive. If they're like me, I registered 3 months out, and then I'm trying to figure out where in the world do I go to find that link for the conference. And so it takes me a minute to get on that, or I'm in another meeting and I'm running from it right into the other.
You have a hand up from somebody.
Let's see. They put it down. I can't tell. There it is. Haley, if you would, could you check on the person with their hand up to see if they're having some sort of technical issue? I think that's
Sure.
Cherie, or if it's an accidental, I raised my hand. Still getting everyone admitted. Just give us a few more moments. Again, we are looking to get started here in the next couple of minutes with our session 4 of the TRAM conference series. We appreciate your patience as we work to get everyone admitted. We're trying to get everyone admitted prior to the presenter beginning so that we don't have so many of these dings in the background as others come online after she gets started. Give it one more minute and then we will get started. Hopefully by then we will have everyone who is registered to attend into the meeting. Welcome everyone to session 4. If you've been on for a few minutes, you've heard me say this a couple of times, but I just want to repeat it for all of those that are just now joining us from the lobby. We appreciate your patience as we work to get everyone admitted from the lobby. We will soon begin within the next 60 seconds, maybe a little more, our session 4 for the TRAM conference series with Jessica Cafran presenting from Denver, Colorado at UC Health regarding how to get your data out of the trauma registry report writing basics. We appreciate the patience as again we get everyone admitted from the lobby. Listeners and attendees will remain in listen-only mode for the duration of this session. We also encourage that you use the chat and/or Q&A if you have comments or questions during the presentation. Just another minute. I think we've about gotten everyone in. All right, I think we are good to go ahead and get started. We may have a few coming in, so I apologize if you're able to hear that dinging as others join a little after. Welcome, everyone. Most of you know me. I'm Amanda Truelove, and I want to welcome Jessica Cofran from Denver, Colorado with UC Health to present for our session 4 of our conference series for TRAM about how to get your data out of the trauma registry, report writing basics. You will remain in listen-only mode for the duration of the session. We do encourage and ask that you use the chat or Q&A for comments and questions, and we will hold those until the end and have time at the end to try and get some of those answered. Myself, Haley, or Jackie will moderate those questions for Jessica at the end of the session. With that, I'll turn it over to Jess. We appreciate you being here and look forward to your presentation.
All right. Thank you so much, Amanda. It's really lovely to be here, and I'm excited to talk about report writing with the lot of you all today. Quick introduction. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Jess Coffran. I am a trauma informatics manager. I work in Northern Colorado for UC Health Northern Colorado region. So I have 4 hospitals that I oversee. I am an ICU nurse by trade. I like to joke and say that I am a trauma nurse turned trauma nerd. I have been working in trauma for the last 13 years and really just absolutely love trauma data and trauma registry. And so I'm really happy to have this opportunity to present with you guys today. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, I want to let you guys know that I have no disclosures. Believe me, I wish I did. If I did have disclosures, I might be spending a little bit more time in a place like this. But alas, still working hard and, boots in the trenches, working with trauma data. So learning objectives for us today, this is going to include talking about different report types, common logic operators and ways that we use those within reporting, and then talking about the importance of a reporting schedule. So first things first, we want to talk about our trauma data. So the whole purpose that we're looking at reporting is because we're looking at data implementation. All right, we have this data and we want to transition the information that exists in our trauma registry to some sort of actionable item, some knowledge, some wisdom that translates into evidence-based practice for impacting trauma patient outcomes. That's our ultimate goal. So things that we use our registry for, we use it for the PIPS process. So for all of the PI, initiatives, we utilize this data to drive those things and to determine, do we have loop closure? Do we even have an issue at all? Different operational needs. So if you're looking at expanding your trauma center, maybe you have got an increase in volume. You need to have this registry data so that you can support that and get the administrative support you need to expand your staffing ratios. We use this information for injury prevention. So what types of mechanisms of injury are you seeing within your trauma center? We get this data out so we can see that and direct our injury prevention efforts. So, a good example of this is one of my hospitals happens to be in a college town. In our college town, we have a lot of auto-ped injuries. So lots of folks walking around getting hit by cars. And so one of the things we're doing to work on that with this trauma registry data is we're looking at what's the location that these things are occurring, that these accidents are happening. And so how can we further bolster the resources and crosswalks and other things of that nature to reduce these injuries in our population. Other things we might use is outreach. So where are we getting our patients from? Do we have a lot of rural referrals coming through, that could be a great place for us to reach out and provide some trauma education and further strengthen our trauma systems. Of course, we do risk-adjusted benchmarking for any of us who are ACS centers. Risk-adjusted benchmarking is required, so that is something that we are doing, and it also allows us to see how are we performing against other similar centers or not so similar centers, but we're risk-adjusted, so we can see how that looks. We also use this for quality and for research. Something that's important that I always like to remind everybody of is as you are completing your trauma registry data and submitting it to whichever agency that might be, so a state agency, a regional agency, the National Trauma Data Bank, this truly is being used for research. Even if you're not doing it at your facility, it is happening with this data and truly impacting trauma patient outcomes, not just locally, but really globally. So it's really important for us to be able to utilize this data appropriately. So the next thing we're going to talk about is what are some of those things that you need to know in order to build meaningful reports. So there's a lot of aspects of report writing and trauma registry data that are important to keep in mind as we move through this process. The first thing you're going to want to know about is your data. The second thing, software. Also good to consider what sort of policies are in place around data sharing within your organization. And then also, what are they even asking you for? Sometimes when our folks ask for data on anything, they might not even really know what the ask is. So it can be really challenging to ferret that out. The first steps for knowing your data is to have a clear understanding of what data you're collecting within your trauma registry. I always like to refer back to our data dictionary. For me and for my team, the data dictionary truly is the Bible of the work that we do. It guides everything that we do within that trauma registry so that we have standardized data that has the same meaning across the board. It's important to keep in mind with that data dictionary that there are changes to the dictionary. So you want to know, depending upon what reporting year you're going to be pulling out, what are the differences or nuances in those data elements? And you may have more than one data dictionary that you are operating with. So you may be using the National Trauma Data Standard Dictionary. You may also have a state data dictionary, possibly a regional dictionary. And one of the most important things is to have a hospital-based data dictionary for those fields that are not included in the National Trauma Data Standard or the state data dictionary. It's nice to have that definition of what do these fields mean. That way, when you're planning your report writing, you have a very clear idea of what data elements you have, what that means, and how you can piece these things together to affect the information that you're trying to convey. Other things to consider is within your trauma registry, do you have calculated fields? How are those fields calculated? It can be very challenging. I can tell you from my experience, I have a trauma registry that's been in place since the 90s, so it's been a minute or two, and we have multiple fields that speak to different calculations, and those calculations are all done just a little bit differently. So it's important to have that understanding of where are those calculations coming from and which of those fields is the most appropriate for your report. The other piece is looking at data validation. Have you validated your data? Making sure that those processes have all gone through before you put in your reports. So where are you in the validation process? If you are incomplete and have not validated the most recent month, maybe it's not appropriate to include that information in your reports yet. We can always go back and rerun reports. The next piece that's really important is ensuring that you know your software. So here we have a few logos from a few software companies that you may be using here. This is not all inclusive. Not every software company is representative here, but these are some of the big hitters that we have, currently in the United States. So ESO currently is also has acquired Lancet Clinical Data Management and Digital Innovations. So if you are using one of those products, that is in the ESO realm of things, there's also the Image Trend product. So they all were built at different times by different groups of engineers. And so they all have a little bit different approach to how we're going to pull data out. Now, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this talk to say specifically what is the report writing for each of these individual products. However, we're going to talk about some reporting basics that will get you through once you can learn some of those nuances of your product. So each of these companies should be able to provide you with a reporting manual. It usually looks like Greek when you first come down to it. But if we can get an understanding on some of these reporting basics, it may make a little bit more sense to understand the way that they assemble their reports. Something else to keep in mind is don't forget that there are other sources of data that you can utilize for reporting. So we are almost all on electronic medical records at this point. So there may be an opportunity to tap into your EMR team and see if you can pull reports directly out of that medical record. So keep those things in mind as we move along. But again, that is beyond the scope of this course. Just want you to keep that in mind that there are multiple ways to skin a cat, so to speak. Other things that we need to keep in mind as we're starting to build reports is looking at data privacy policies. So what we are dealing with here within our trauma registry is protected health information. As healthcare workers, we all had to go through HIPAA training, and we do it every year. We get up to date, like make sure you're not, disclosing this information because it has really significant legal, reparations. So we get a pretty significant fine if we're sharing this information and it's not something that we should be sharing. So that's something to certainly keep in mind as you're moving through and to understand what constitutes protected health information. Some things you would be surprised are actually considered protected health information, even though it doesn't seem like that would be something that would be very indicative. Examples here are age and arrival date. Those are considered protected health information. So it's important to be familiar with that. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act does have a website. The link is down at the bottom of the screen here, and we will share these slides. And you can access those, and it will give you a way more information than you really want about HIPAA, but it will also give you a list of 18 different fields that are considered PHI. If you are looking for safe conduct, you just make sure you take all of those out to de-identify data. So it's important to have an understanding of what those are, especially if you're in a smaller community. I know we experience that here in some of our smaller communities, even the description of the injury events, because it can be, very unique, can actually be protected health information. So keep those things in mind while you're writing reports and sharing information. It's also important to check in with leadership within your facility to have an understanding of what are the data security practices that you are following within your department. We need to know who is asking for this data. Are these internal requests somewhere within your organization, within your hospital, or is this an external data request? Maybe you are partnering with some outreach agencies that are really interested in looking at, providing helmets to specific areas for children at schools, and they want to know where more of these, accidents are occurring. So if that's the case, what kind of data can you release to these people? Do you have a process in place to verify that you have approval of your trauma program leadership for releasing this data? It's important to make sure that you're checking with your leadership. They may want to review all data before it leaves your program to have that thumb on the pulse or finger on the pulse of what's going on with the trauma data, where that information is going, and how that's impacting the community that you all are serving. So keep that piece in mind. Other things to consider is when you're working through this data, your data requests, is there a different way to provide this information that reduces protected health information? So we want to see if we can provide the minimum necessary data possible to fulfill the data request need and that goal of that request. One way that we can do that is providing binned data. So by binning your data, you're not giving the specific age of a patient. In this example here, you're saying any patient with the age, this example is a small bin. So pediatric patients, non-pediatric patients, geriatric patients. Those are the three bins that are in this example here. But maybe you want to bin things a little bit different. Maybe you're looking at geriatric patients in general, and you want to look at age 65 to 75, maybe 75 to 85, and you're going super geriatric, and then 85 plus. You want to go see how many of that very elderly population are coming through your doors, since we're all seeing elderly populations anyhow. So report requests. As a trauma registry professional, you are getting report requests from every single direction all the time. There's always somebody who is interested in having data. Can you get me data on this? Can you get me data on that? Do you know what our current volume is? How many transfers in did we have last week? All of those different questions that you may have coming in at all different times. So it's really important to have an understanding of how are we best going to organize these report requests, right? How are we prioritizing? How are we making sure that this information is delivered in a timely fashion and still is meeting the needs of the trauma program and the hospital as a whole? One tool that we use to make sure that we are tracking and understanding what these requests are and able to prioritize these things is by using a report request form or a data request form. So these forms help you keep track of when requests are coming in, who's requesting them, and how the data is going to be used, where things are going to be going, so that you can stay organized as a trauma registry professional. So if you don't have a report request form, I would recommend that you develop one, just to keep you in an organized fashion moving forward, because it can get a little overwhelming with the number of requests that are coming through. The other piece that this document will help you do is to understand how to build your report. You have to understand the nuance of the request and the goal of that request, when things are going to be due, and lots of other pieces to ensure that when you put through the work that it takes to build this report, that you're successful on the first try. So this is a list of some components that are very important in those report requests. I will tell you the time frame is one that I am always going back and asking people about, because they say, I really want spinal cord injury data. Okay, for when? And they're like, spinal cord injury data, right. I want to know how it's changed. Okay, over what time? All right, so it's really important to establish those things, because if they're really wanting to see, I want to know what the change is over the last 5 years, that's hugely different than I really just want to know like what's going on in the last 12 months, right? So it's important to have that understanding of that piece. And are there any specific limitations on the population? Do you want all comers? Do you want patients who are included in the NTDB only? Do you want all of those activations who came in through the door and then were discharged? What kind of population are you wanting to look at in these reports? So this is a fun example of a very basic report request form, and this is totally fine. I will tell you that the date on this says 2015, 2016, 2014. So this has been around for a while. That does not make it less effective. It is still useful to have reports like this, moving through your facility. And this particular form is a paper form that is submitted to the trauma department, through whatever your mechanism may be. And that is still okay. If that's the best way that you guys have to make that happen at your facility, this is good. It's a tracking mechanism of some sort. So that's totally fine. As you go through this basic report request form, you'll see things like, who is the report for? So who am I going to send this report to? What is the purpose? I need to have an understanding. Is this a one-time report, or do you need me to run this every month? What kind of information do I need to know about this? And what is the delivery format in which you would like to get the report back? You just want an Excel spreadsheet that's just a list of everything? Cool, I can give you that. Would you prefer to have it in graphical representation so you can copy and paste it directly into your presentation for the senior leadership group? Great, we can do that too. We just have to have that understanding and know, what your expectations are. This is a little bit more detailed report request form. So this is a form that comes straight with clinical data management. So that happens to be the registry product that we are using at my facility. It was the only reason that it's here. I don't endorse any specific product. They all have pros and cons, which as you work through your trauma registry, you will start to identify places where you're like, I really wish this one had what that one has, and there are some other things that are different. But anyway, so this request form includes the list of fields that are used in reporting. That can be really helpful for you as a report writer to say, hey, I know that I need the hospital arrival date and time, not the hospital admission date and time, because that's what they have marked on this message. Now, there is a caveat to that. The folks that are filling out these forms don't necessarily know your data at the same level that you do. So if they are clicking these particular boxes and they're saying, I want the hospital admission date, it might be a good idea to clarify what that difference is. Maybe you clarify it on your report form. What is the difference between admission date and arrival date? Because there is a difference with that. And a lot of those research requests will say admission date, and other things to consider with admission versus arrival too. But there's other, there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to our data variables. So that goes back to really knowing your data and what's in your registry. So this list of common fields in here, this is just those fields that are included in trauma-based. They may be something totally different in your registry product. So maybe when it comes to the from hospital code here, that's really the name of the referring hospital. It's the code for the referring hospital in trauma-based, but it may be referring hospital in your facility. So just important to keep an eye on those codes, know your software, and also know your definitions. You may also get, a little bit wild and crazy, like I like to do, and have a really comprehensive report request form. So ours is actually electronic. So this is a few screenshots of that form for you here today. It includes our trauma registry data request agreement. How long should they expect us for turnaround? And then also, who do we contact if we have any questions? What are the rules and regs following this? Making sure we're giving credit to the trauma registry if this is used for publication, yada, yada. It also goes through and says, hey, what are the data points that you want? Do you just want to count? Do you have an IRB, so Institutional Review Board approval? Because a lot of the times we need that before we can release any information to make sure that we are adhering with HIPAA policies and all of that other compliance. So now that we have our data request, we need to start working through that process of building our valuable reports. So this process should be a structured and organized report or organized approach that you follow every time. The whole process is moving from understanding the request, preparing and organizing the information, all the way through validation that your reports are accurate, analysis of information, and presentation of that information or delivery of that information to your requester. The very last step you'll see in this process is tracking that data that you have shared. This is really important for a lot of reasons, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through the presentation. So, report types. This is where we're really going to start. We've got our report request. We know what it is that is being asked for delivery. So we need to choose the appropriate report type so that we can deliver the right information. So the first report type that we're going to talk about is a count report. So this may have multiple different names depending upon your registry and how the folks that built your registry decided to name these reports. But basically what this is a type of report that comes out in a cross tabulation. So it'll be somewhere on your spreadsheet and you'll see counts, percentages, you may see averages or other types of statistics or outcome measures that you can put in there, but it'll be just those numbers coming out, no specific patient information. These types of reports can be, pretty complicated. It's not just going to be, okay, how many admissions did I have? You can do how many admissions did I have to which hospital service and by which date. So which month of the year did, the non-surgical service have the highest number of admissions. You can pull that information out using these types of reports. And that can be really helpful, just moving through looking at volumes. So there's pros and cons to both of these, or to this type of report. Like I was saying before, it gives you those quick numbers that you need right out the gate. You can use this for your PI initiatives, and it's also very helpful for a lot of survey information that you may be collecting. Especially if on your application you're looking at, a specific population, we'll say those non-surgical services, admitted or admissions that have different ISS scores. So that's something to keep in mind for that. The cons here is these can be very difficult to validate. If your registry allows it, you can sometimes build this count report and it will have a fancy button that's so lovely that says, hey, would you like this to be a detailed report also? And that's a hard yes coming from me, because that allows you to validate the information that's actually coming through. Validate that you've captured the entire population and all of those other pieces. Without having that validation piece, it can be difficult to know if you're actually missing records that should be included, or how those particular records are being allocated within the metrics that you've chosen here. Couple examples of some count reports here. So on the left side of your screen, this is just a really simple hospital events by month. Clearly, this is not all encompassing because we have more than 6 hospital events that we collect if we are following the National Trauma Data Standard. But just a quick snippet so you can see this report. It comes out, we just say, hey, these are the reports we want, or these are the data elements we want. This is the month that we want to see them for, and it gives you a solid count of those things. It also is giving you a percentage. So how many of your hospital events were an acute kidney injury or a CAUTI. So that can be really helpful as well. Then moving to the right side of the screen, this is a little bit more complex count report, and this is looking at your admissions based on age group and ISS group. So those are things that you may want to see there for other reasons. So pediatrics versus non-pediatrics. This particular report is missing geriatrics, which darn it, but that's something you can easily build in if you're wanting to look at those additional informations. The next type of report is detail reports. We use these a lot, for record level information. So these types of reports you'll see very often for performance improvement initiatives, for research type reports, a lot of that information. This is going to give you specific information to that patient, that provider, or any of those types of data elements. Everything that's related will end up in these reports. For this, there are, again, pros and cons to this type of report. So one of the pros here is it's pretty easy to validate. You can see if the data is missing. You can see if there's a logic error. So for example, you said that the ED disposition was ICU, but you can see that the first patient unit was an acute care unit. So that's a logic error that we could easily identify in those places. It allows us to tell a story when we are pulling this patient information. So if you're pulling something together to provide to, we'll say, your orthopedic liaison. These are the cases that we need you to review because we had an orthopedic response time on these that wasn't met. You can pull all that information, deliver that straight to those liaisons in these types of reports. Some of the cons of these reports, sometimes it's hard to get things all grouped into a single line. It can also be challenging to limit what displays in the field. Like, for example, I really only care for my orthopedic liaison, how many X fixes that they did in this field, but I can't limit my procedures very well to limit to just my external fixators. I'm getting every CT and everything else that ever happened throughout the hospital stay. So that can be a challenge as well. These can be really time consuming if you are using these for your count reports. So this is a great plug to say, hey, utilize those count reports to help you reduce time and be more efficient with things. The other thing is, in reviewing some of these reports, it does require some skill with spreadsheets. So if you don't have current spreadsheet knowledge, I would recommend jumping on and getting a spreadsheet course. There's a lot of stuff through like LinkedIn Learning. There's all kinds of free stuff available online to say, hey, this is some basic spreadsheet manipulation. These are important skills for you as a data professional. So I would recommend making some of those things happen. Here is a nice example of a detailed report. Please don't mind my PHI, that is blacked out. So with this, you can see that I already have a place where I can identify a validation error. So on the far right of the screen for that first EMS systolic blood pressure, I've got 2 places where that is missing. Yet if you look at the hospital arrival mode, both of those people came by ambulance. So why is that data missing? That's one of the pros and one of the great ways that we can do data validation and make sure that these reports are collecting the right data. Some other report types to consider, batch reports. You can actually set a group of reports to all run at the same time and spit you out just oodles of data all at once. That can be really helpful and a time saver. You may have some descriptive statistic reports that are really looking at your population in depth, helping you have an understanding of, how many of our patients truly are geriatric. We feel like it's really a lot. So is it really a lot? It's good to be able to pull those things. And then those research reports, which are usually detailed reports, but with that focus on ensuring all that information is displayed on a single line so that we can use that information in statistical software like our, whatever it is that or SAS or whatever it is that your organization may be using. So the next step is making sure that we are identifying the right population. We need to make sure that we're following inclusion and exclusion criteria for the report. So those things should be included in the report request, right? We are looking at pediatric patients. We are, we do not want any patient who died in the ED. Any of those kinds of things, should be considered when you're starting with this population. It's really like any other limitations that you may be able to glean from your report request are important, and they could be specific diagnoses or procedures or mechanisms of injury, or those who were discharged home, only. We want to see some of those, like whatever that might be. So with that, we need to start talking about some operators. Operators are going to help us make those inclusions and exclusions as we're moving through our report building. So some of the common logical operators you're going to see, and these you're going to see all the time, are and, or, and not, right? These are very important for limiting down your populations. So you can see from the demonstration here, from the visual, that if you use and, it's going to give you a much smaller population. So in this example, I only want households that have a puppy and a kitten in the same household, right? Whereas if you use or as your operator, I'll take any household that has a puppy or a kitten no matter what. So it very much broadens your search. And then the not says, I really want households that have a puppy, but if they have a puppy and a kitty, I don't want that. So just a puppy. So it just demonstrates some of the ways that these are limiting. These are also called Boolean operators. They define what is like a relationship, like a true false with respect to whatever it is, the term that you are putting in your limitation. So the next thing we're going to talk about is some of those terms. So common comparison operators, these go into your terms. So if you need to do something like you're looking at your pediatric population, well, we're going with the trauma definition of pediatric, and that's an age less than 15. But maybe you want to pull this information based on a hospital definition, depending upon your location. That's the way it is for us. Is any patient under 18 counts as pediatrics? Maybe we want a less than or equal to, right? So this is kind of all coming back from math back in the days, what these might be. Less than, greater than, less than or equal to, all of those are still the same thing. Other places where we, need to consider are equal to or not equal to. So here I have the symbols for these operators, but they may not use symbols within your registry. It may be the full-on definition. It may say less than, and it might be a drop-down menu that you use within yours. Or it might be that, you are that you have like different shortcuts or a text version. So it's important to have that understanding of your registry and how that's going to look there. All right. So other common operators are starts with. So these are, or ends with. These are really great when you're doing reporting that has to do with specific diagnoses. So for example, on the left of the screen, starts with. Say you want every patient who has a concussion, period, right? You could go in, you could enter, I want to include every single code that is a concussion code. But looking at this, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 codes that you have to put in. If you use a start with string operator, and you say, well, I just want this SO6.0 code, anything that starts with that, I'll keep it, then you can get all of these codes with just one term. So that's really helpful. The other one you could use is ends with. This is very helpful for us in trauma when we're looking at open fractures, right? Because that's really where that seventh character is different for us, is in those open fractures. So I only want those that end with B and C, right? Because those are our open fractures. Or maybe I just want the really gnarly open fractures. I only want the ones that end with C. So you can put that in to limit your reports as well. Other really fun operators that are going to be very helpful to understand while you're writing reports: between. So this one will get us a range of codes. Very important, especially when you're looking at stuff like, AIS codes or things by diagnosis. So in this example here I have for you, I have cerebrum, right? So I want to pull all of our codes that are contusion codes, but I'm really getting specific with this report, and I really only want those reports that are a single contusion. If you got more than one, I don't want you. So I'm going to start with a range, starting with that first range for our single contusions. We got the 140.602.3 code, and moving down to the end of the range, 140.610.5 code. Great. I've identified my range. Those are all of my single, contusions, and this is going to, be really helpful for my report. What I would caution you on is while you're looking through your AIS coding book, if you look at that very first code at the top, it's 140.699.3. Wait a minute, that number is a lot higher than the code range that we just identified. So if that's something that you're wanting to include within your range, you may have to put that in another line. Put in your range plus also this one, depending upon what you are pulling based on those things. Some other common operators that you'll see that I don't have a slide for include like all. I want all of the codes to be within this range. Or one. I want one of the codes to be within this range. So you may use those to limit your reports as well. If I say I want all of the codes to be within this range, that means they can't have a code anywhere outside of this range. So if they have a bump or a bruise on their elbow in addition to that contusion in their brain, I'm not including them because I want all of them to be in this area. That can be really helpful when you're pulling isolated hip fractures, or if you're looking at things that you're just looking at isolated fractures or isolated injuries. That's helpful for there. Or one means I don't care how many other ones they have. If they have this, I want them included in my mix. So having that understanding will help you understand how many records you're going to get returned as well. Now, here is the kicker, and this is syntax. So what syntax is the rules that control the structure of, the terms and like basically how you are saying what you need in your report. So syntax is something that's used in language, right? So if you think about the way that we structure our language, and I say that, I'm going to go, to a beautiful beach this weekend. Whereas if you use it in Spanish, you're going to go to La Playa Bonita, right? So that way in Spanish, we use the adjective after, whereas in English, we use it before. So that is one of the caveats of using these different trauma registry systems. They all have a little bit different syntax. The way that you put things together is going to be different. So I do have a sad face on there because that means I can't walk you through that piece today, but that is something to keep in mind and refer back to those reporting manuals, for your particular product, or, reach out to support as well to have some of that understanding how that might work with your particular product. The number 3 here, how to group your operators, is really, really, really important because this is the creation of logic blocks. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. Logic blocks are really the building block of reporting. Having an understanding of how the syntax works and those limiting terms and, or, less than, greater than, contains, between, any of those things. The way that we're putting those together is the pinnacle of what you need to understand to be a successful report writer. Once you understand how to put these things together in one system, you're pretty much set to go in any other system. You just have to learn the syntax. So you're just learning a little bit different language, but the basic concepts will still apply. What this does is tells your system what's important to this report. So you can say, I want my highest tier activations and my middle tier activations, but not a non-activation. You can do all of those things, and depending upon how you put them in order and what that syntax is, so maybe you're using parentheses like the order of operations back in math. Oh gosh, not any more of that. But some of that is back. And that's really going to help you understand how to build these reports. So if you have a report request that says, I want all of these things, but none of these things, then how do you put that together into your logic block? that can allow you to really write some very complex reports, which is going to be very important for us moving forward with the new ECS standards, especially looking at response times and all of those things. Now we have criteria we have to follow. So how are we going to write those reports to make that happen? The other thing that's very important is understanding the right field values. So your data request form may have this on you or on it, or you may be reaching out to your trauma program manager to have a better understanding of really what's the goal of this and what is going to be the most appropriate field to put in here. This brings us right back to understanding our data dictionary and our data definitions, and then understanding what those definitions are within your trauma registry. This is just a screenshot from TraumaBase that says, hey, this code, this is what it means. And even then, they're still not very clear, right? So you're going to want to get nice and intimate with that data and have that understanding of what that means. So our next step is we're going to put this information together and build it into a report within the trauma registry. So however your trauma registry puts this together, this is a screenshot from TraumaBase, just looking at a detailed report, but yours may look differently. You can see that we have logic blocks here where things are put together. I've got different limitations in here. I've got for TraumaBase, we use this text version of our operators. So instead of an equal sign, I have EQ, right? I have ands, I have ors, all kinds of stuff in here in this report. The other thing about this report is you can actually choose when you're building report what that output is going to look like. So back on your report request form, did it want you to give it to them in a spreadsheet, or did they want it in some other fashion? So you can choose that. That is down on the right corner. Bottom corner. So those things are important. And I wish I could walk you through exactly what that looks like in your registry. The next important step is to test your report, right? Run that thing, right? Does it look right? Are you missing data? Does the data make sense? I recently wrote a report, and I'm going to give full disclosure here, wrote a report looking at our pelvic fractures that needed blood and had some sort of procedure done for pelvic fixation over the last couple years. Ran this report, and I got one patient at our level 1 trauma center that had, an unstable pelvic fracture, got blood. I really don't think that's right. So I had to go back and reevaluate my logic block and say, hey, where am I missing something here? And you know what it was? I had a parenthesis in the wrong place. That darn syntax got me. So that's, if you're getting reports coming back that don't look right, take a look at those logic blocks. Look at that syntax and see if there's something little like that that's off. That's where we have the bonus of being trauma registry professionals who are very detail oriented, and we can pick up on those things. So keep that in mind. Also, is the data coming out in the right format that you need? Maybe, you really wanted the code description. Good example of this is, looking at our diagnosis codes. Did you really want to send them, S dot, 15 dot, blah, 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 or did you want to send the description of what that code is? It really depends on your audience. If it's research, maybe they do want those ICD-10 codes. If you're sending it to the ICU nurse manager, I don't think they're going to want the ICD-10 codes. They want to know what the injury was. So keep in mind what your audience is for that thing. All right, once you have this report tested and validated, you are ready to run, analyze, do whatever it is you need to do and prepare for delivery of that report. So this is just an example of, say, a time to trach report. On the left, this is the report output that we had. We transitioned that, did our analyzing through utilizing pivot tables. That's another function of spreadsheets. So if you do not have pivot table skills, I would recommend looking those up. It is a game changer. That way you don't have to do a lot of manual calculations and moving things around, because it'll just do it for you. Use that technology to your advantage. So With that pivot table, you're then able to change that information into a visual, right straight into a graph. With graphs that you are providing to outside facilities, please feel free to annotate those graphs anywhere. If it's not perfectly clear exactly what it is, make sure you're labeling things, put annotations in, anything that you might need to make sure that the end goal of this data is conveyed. That's so important. Finally, once you're done with that, you want to make sure you're tracking the work that you've done. So with that, there's a lot of reasons to track things. You want to know who has your trauma data. That's important, all right? Because that way, if somebody says, oh yeah, I got this from trauma, you know for sure if they really got it from you or not, or how valid that data might be. You want to make sure you're in compliance with laws, especially if you're doing a lot of research. There's like a 7-year window that we have to let folks know if their information was used within research. So if they call us up and say, hey, have you used my information in research? We have to have the ability to go back and say, yes, we did. We used it for this, or whatever that might be. It also helps demonstrate the work product that you're putting together as a trauma registry professional, and really validates the time that you have there, the time that's dedicated to that. Like, look at all these reports I'm doing. I'm a very productive individual. That's really an important thing, especially in these times of healthcare finance crisis, and a lot of cuts and things. It's really important to say, hey, there's value here, and be able to demonstrate those things. It can also help you stay concurrent with those recurrent report requests. So if you have something that's coming up, it's a monthly report request, make sure that it's on your tracking so it stays on your radar and you don't miss that request. Another thing to help keep you on track would be to have a reporting schedule. So whatever that might look like, if you have reporting recurrent reports that you're running for PI, or you're running for your operations meeting, or you're running for your peer meeting, having some sort of a schedule put together can be really helpful, so you know who's responsible for what and when. All right, so we're going to do some quick practice here, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. So I'll move through quickly. So here's a practice report request, and this is using that simple report request form that we put together there. So we're going to do a request for the orthopedic service line. They are really wanting to track the number of pediatric patients that are treated by the orthopedic service that are hemodynamically unstable and structurally unstable pelvic fractures. That's what they want to know about. They just want to know it once. They're going to take it to their meeting and discuss this over with their team. Okay, great. So what is the population that they want to look at this on? Okay, so they're saying pediatric, but they want age under 15. Okay, good to know. And hemodynamically unstable, blood pressure less than 90. Okay, wait, is it less than 90 or is it 90 or less? It's 90 or less. That's important to pay attention to those things when we're choosing our operations. We've got our date range. They're looking at the last fiscal year. That's just so it doesn't say that, but just so you know, that's a fiscal year. And then they want it put to you in Excel, but they really would like this in graphical format so they can use it for their presentation. Great. Good to know. So the first thing we need to do is choose our appropriate report type. They're really just asking for counts. We don't need details. So we can go ahead and make this a count report, right? Yay, that was super easy to make that determination. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to figure it out what type of report they want. So keep that in mind when you're reading through those requests. The next thing we're going to do is look at identifying our population. So we know we have an age less than 15. We know we have systolic blood pressure less than or equal to 90. We want our provider specialty to be orthopedics, so it has to be seen by orthopedics. And we want those structurally unstable pelvic fractures. So the first three are pretty, self-explanatory, right? Age less than 15. Systolic blood pressure less than or equal to 90. Provider specialty equal to orthopedics, right? So that's pretty easy. But what about the diagnosis? How are we going to capture that bad boy right there? So this is applying that between operator. So if we take a look at this, we're looking for structurally unstable pelvic fractures. So if we look at our AIS codes, we can see that down here, these codes down here are the ones that are unstable in some way, shape, or form. So looking at those, we have our code range. We can identify that code range right here and plug this into our terms. So each of these terms. So we want all of these terms to identify our population. Here's the trouble part, or the trouble spot. The crux of it all is linking it all together and understanding the logic block with this piece. Keep in mind, this depends on the syntax within your system. So we need to know which logical operators we're going to use. So going back to our report request, we want all of the patients who were pediatric, who were hemodynamically unstable, who were seen by orthopedics and had an unstable pelvis fracture. So that sounds like I want this and this and this and this, which sounds to me like that's an and operator, right? So if they said, I want all of the pediatric patients who were hemodynamically unstable with any pelvic fracture or had a structurally unstable, then we might be using some different operators in here. But this one is pretty straightforward. It's a and, all of these things, and an and an and. The next piece to keep in mind is we've got to select our date range. This is going to look different in everybody's registry. So you may build this into your population filter, or it may come separately, or there's a lot of different ways that this actually gets applied to your reports. But just keep in mind, don't forget to set your date range. If you're running it on your entire registry, that can be a little bit crazy. Otherwise, you may actually have a short date range selected, and you may not get a broad enough swath of your population. From there, we're going to go ahead and build that report, test that report, and validate that report with the steps that we talked about before, and step into analyzing that report, creating visuals, and presenting that information. So just so you know, this is fictitious data. I would be very upset to know that there were this many unstable pediatric pelvic fractures at any center. So I really hope that's not the case for anybody. But just fictitious data, throwing it together. Part of our analysis, we can see from this visual that we have a much higher volume of these types of patients during our busy summer months. And so providing that, there you go. You've got a report. You can send that off to your orthopedic service line, and you've successfully created that report. All right. Well, that's report writing basics in a nutshell. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions, and I'll be happy to take some questions now.
Thank you for that, Jess. So just to remind everyone, we did record this session and it will be out on the TRAM YouTube channel. Jess will provide a PDF handout that I will get distributed along with the link for the recording. Let me look. I don't see any in the Q&A.
There were 3 questions in the chat. So the first thing is just requesting a copy of that data request form. Is that something you're willing to share?
Absolutely, I can share that form. So I will share all 3 forms. I will send them to Amanda, and she can share those, to the greater group.
Thank you. Another question was, is there a maximum number of elements you allow someone to request?
That is such a good question, because, we've got those folks that come through and they say, I want everything. And you're like, but everything is not pertinent to your request. So I would not say that I have a maximum number of elements per se. When I have my report request, I give them a list of common data elements to choose from, so that they kind of have an idea of where to go, and keep it limited to that. That helps me to be able to get them a fast turnaround, because I know exactly what those fields are, where they need to be. And it also helps me to apply this report to multiple organizations. So that's helpful if we're looking at a regional data request, and I want to pull this from all of my hospitals, or maybe I want to pull it from another facility. It's a multi-institutional study, something to that effect. If I'm using standard variables, then I can apply that report someplace else. If this is a report that's happening within just my organization, just my facility, I sometimes will play nice in the sandbox with my or with my research folks and get them a little bit more information if that is possible. But if it's going to be a huge heavy lift, then I don't do it at all. We want to make sure that we are respectful of the time that goes into these report requests and make sure that you're balancing that with the other competing priorities of your role.
Okay, we had one final question. Someone did notice that you were using AIS codes in your example reports, and they wanted to know, was that for demonstration purposes only?
So, just to be clear, I'm not sure if we're saying are those correct AIS codes or what it is. Yes, I was using that for demonstration. However, with that demonstration, those are actual real AIS codes, and it is actually like an example. I'll be honest, I've never had a report request that says I only want a single contusion, in the brain. It's usually any old contusion, but I wanted to demonstrate with those particular code ranges, that AIS is not always in order. So that way you can, keep that in mind as you're writing your own reports to include that AIS.
We've had a couple more come in. One of them was, how did you educate yourself in report writing, and how long did it take to get comfortable with it?
Okay, that's also a great question. So like many of us, when I stepped into trauma, it was, here's your desk, here's your computer, this is called a registry, good luck. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's definitely interesting. So a lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is phone a friend, right? So like Amanda Truelove here is one incredible friend who has a wealth of registry knowledge. So if you have an Amanda in your life that you can reach out to help you learn some of this logic block creation, then I absolutely recommend that. I have actually reached out to the vendor and, had some one-on-one education with different vendor specialists that have that intricate knowledge of that particular product, because they all are a little bit different. And I would say, how long did it take me to get comfortable with it? I'd say a long time, right? At least a couple of years to really feel like you're really good at report writing. And even today, I sometimes, will have questions and doubts. And again, that's when I reach out to my phone a friend network and say, hey, does this make sense to you? Because it can be very challenging to link all of these logical operators together and build those logic blocks.
Okay, I see one last question, and that is, do you keep track of reports that are regularly generated for things like trauma operations in a spreadsheet?
So, kind of, right? I'm going to say yes, like that. So we certainly keep track of the original report request, and that goes into our tracking mechanism, and we keep it in there, says, hey, this is a recurrent request, and we're going to be tracking through X amount of time. We also use some other tracking methods and reminder methods. So, if you can put in a reminder through your registry, through an Outlook calendar, or, through any sort of project management software that you may use for your day-to-day management, we have those things to track what that is. And once we've run those reports, we do keep them all in a same place in that shared drive, so that our risk departments or any other, patient relation departments can reach out and figure out if that information has been utilized for research. So that way we're keeping open lines of communication.
Right. Is that all of the questions, Haley?
Yes, ma'am, besides lots of kudos and saying how great this was.
Okay. I thank you, Jess, for this presentation. I'm very appreciative, and I know others are as well. For those of you who report to Illinois, Illinois has partnered with ESO to actually walk you through. So Annette Odell is providing sessions, so hour-long webinars on report writing in CV5. It's free as far as I know. You can reach out to myself or Haley and we can get you in contact with Joe Albanese if you are not familiar with his contact information, but Annette really goes through all of that. And I too reach out to networks. So I'm working also with Elvis Presley Trauma Center. And just a week ago, I was on the phone with Jess and several others on this call asking, I cannot get this field to pull the way the researchers need it. So I reached out to Annette and she said that she thinks we will have the ability to look at recorded sessions for how to extrapolate or extract that data using all of this information that Jess walked us through in those webinars for Illinois. She thinks Illinois posts those on their website. So if you're not familiar with that, let me know. And then if you're outside of the region, maybe we can look at trying to get you connected with ESO to partner and offer your region or state some of similar training as well as the other vendors. So I agree, Jess, that's key is communication with the vendor and then that professional development. This session winds up our spring and summer sessions. So starting in August, we'll move into our fall sessions. That will be sent out along with the PDF from Jess and the link for the recording to TRAM. With that, I have nothing more to add. Thank you so much, Jess, for taking the time out of your day to present for our state on report writing. Enjoy your day, and we will see you in August, all of you who want to attend. Thank you.